Good morning, everybody. Hi from Taha. I'm very excited to work with you this quarter, course dynamics, and this is a introduce to that. Anyway, how many PhD students do? 1, 2, 1, 3, 4. Oh, so the majority of my students, I think you should drop it. You will. We'll see. Anyway, let's see if this is working. Yes, it is working. This is ME 241 Dynamics, and today's lecture is just introduction. And I start by saying dynamics is the science of everything. Probably this is overstating, but you can imagine why I said that. You have fluid dynamics, you have structural dynamics, you have molecular dynamics, you have biological dynamics, you have hard dynamics. Almost in every single discipline you have a branch of dynamics. And from the point of view of applications, you name it, it's ubiquitously found. Airplanes, cars, submarines, bridges, skyscrapers, roller coasters, space shuttles, tanks, and even machine guns, right? Every single discipline, this building, the designers definitely have used at some point F equals MA. When a tree leaf falls down, it falls down according to F equals MA. Every single phenomenon happening around us that we can observe in our time scale and length scale, there is part of dynamics in it. Okay, so this ubiquitous science, this very essential science, how old is it? Do you have an idea? How old is dynamics? Anybody can say maybe 20th century, 16th century? Any guess?
1000 BC. Since the universe is created.
Yeah, but we're talking about for sure, I mean, right? Objects are falling since the universe is created. We're talking about documents that can be traced. I'm sure that ancient Egyptians have used F equals MA some point in time when building the pyramids, but this is the oldest that we can trace. Aristotle, about 400 years before Christmas. Actually, Aristotle, you would be surprised when you know that Aristotle actually arrived at what we know nowadays as the principle of virtual work. He developed the lever law, you know, the lever under the principle that states what is gained in force is lost in velocity. Actually, if you think about it for a minute, if you just replace velocity by a virtual displacement, this is the principle of virtual work, right? What is gained in force is lost in virtual displacement. Actually, he introduced the term virtual velocity. He was a philosopher, so he believed in this, and we're gonna see today how these philosophical statements might benefit the science. He said that, you know, there is a natural place to which all moving objects are approaching if no obstacles are encountered. And of course, he believed that this place is the center of the earth. He believed that wherever is a motion, there is a force, which in nowadays terms, it's as if the force is proportional to velocity. In order to keep things moving, you have to exert a force, which is wrong, because it contradicts Newton's first law. But people kept believing in the concept that force is proportional to velocity for a time. And then, still before Christmas, it's not worthy to mention Archimedes, of course, and his contributions to buoyancy, at least. Almost all of us know about that. And then we're going to do a big jump, actually. Big jump in dates. Now this is the 16th century, and also big jump in contributions and seriousness of the science. So most of dynamicists, they have consensus on the answer of the following questions. If you're gonna name 3 names that made the history of dynamics, what would be these 3 names? Let's first by one name. What is the only name that you must know before coming to this conclusion? Newton, right? If you just go out in the street and talk to any person with, perhaps with a good GPA in high school, will definitely say, yo, I know Newton for sure. F equals ma, right? That's right. And then who else? If you lived in the 21st century, exactly Einstein. It is a great name, and probably you will know why by the end of this course, hopefully. And actually the third name, just to stop tantalizing you more, it's Galileo. Because he laid down the first truly scientific foundation. Now it's becoming very rigorous. It's not just hypothetical statements. Very rigorous, mathematically, experimentally, inferring knowledge from experiment. He actually improved that principle. You can see now how meticulous he was. He said, no, it's not what is gained in force is lost in velocity in general. It's only the velocity component in the direction of the force that really matters. Okay, so this is, yeah, now we're talking about work, right? Because work is just force times velocity or displacement in the direction of the force. So this is the correct statement of what we know now as the principle of virtual work. And he applied it to study the equilibrium of a body with an inclined plane. You can see now how meticulous he was, what precise component he wanted. And he was the first experimentalist in the history of dynamics. He used to do experiment to infer knowledge from that experiment. Basically, experiments on falling objects and projectiles. And from these experiments, he came up with the concept of acceleration. The rate of change of velocity, or the change of velocity. It's like I said before him, this was the predominant concept, is that force is almost proportional to velocity. If you need to move things, or keep things moving, you need to apply force. This is not correct. So he came up with what is very close to Newton's second law. Galileo's law of inertia. Force causes a change in velocity. It's not causing velocity to be maintained. And no force is required to maintain a motion with a constant magnitude and direction. This is almost Newton's first law, and maybe even has a relation with Newton's second law. Force causes a change in velocity, right? This is Galileo, and he came up also with a very important concept, the concept of inertial system. We know nowadays that an inertial system is just a fixed frame of reference, right? He laid down the foundation for this concept because of the following. You know, these folks, particularly in the 16th century, they had a cosmic spirit. They were just walking around in the universe trying to develop universal laws that govern the behavior of things. They have a cosmic spirit. So he said, okay, if you're going to develop a law of nature, then we need to pick up the right frame of reference. And he said that the right frame of reference, we're going to call it inertial system. And all laws of nature should be applied the same way in all these frames of reference. If you pick the right frame here in the United States, and if you pick the right frame in France, your equation should be written exactly the same way. Okay? Not only that, should be exactly the same way at all time. If you write your equation that governs whatever phenomenon, now at this moment, it should be exactly the same equation if you write it 1 hour later to describe an incident happening 1 hour later, of course. Okay? So these are two characteristics. And then he said, okay, if you pick one of these inertial frames, then any other frame that is moving with a uniform rectilinear motion with respect to that inertial frame is itself an inertial one. Because we tend to think that inertial frames are fixed, not necessarily actually, right? One of the very important objectives of this course is to remove any misconception we all come up from our undergraduate study dynamics. We come up with a lot, and you're going to realize that. So one of the things is that an inertial frame should be necessarily fixed. This is not accurate. An inertial frame should be fixed or should be moving with a constant velocity in a constant direction, okay? With respect to an inertial frame. This new frame is itself an inertial one, which means that if you have a universal law governing any phenomenon, it should be written exactly the same in both frames. Okay? these concepts are very important. We're going to see how Newton used them, exploited them. Then Huygens came right after, also in the 16th century. By the way, Galileo died in January, the first month of the year 1642. In the last month of the same year, December 1642, Newton was born. It's as if the year 1642 doesn't want to leave the universe without a great name in dynamics. Huygens came up with very important concepts. First of all, he studied again. This was a very interesting problem. Is the equilibrium of a body on an inclined plane? He can do experiments with it. So he studied this problem, and he controlled the motion by a rope through the tension in the rope, and he called this tug force. And he came up with a very interesting concept: is that tug is proportional to acceleration. It's almost in the second one. Tug is the force in the tension force in the rope. Basically he's saying force is